The next one is Napi and the mouse. Napi decided to leave his camp. He wanted to get back out into nature. He really misses that kind of life, being out and walking around. And he just wanted to get away from people too. So he started walking, and and he really enjoyed being out in the nature. And he walked and walked. He pretty well walked just all day, and then it was starting to get nightfall. Then he knew he had to try and find a place where to sleep. Because Napi normally doesn't worry about where he's going to sleep or where he's going to have his food, but he always carries his rope. So he kept on looking around. The grass was thick, and it was by this river. And finally, he found an open place. So he put his rope there and he laid down. And by then, it was getting dark. And so he settled down and he was trying to sleep. And just for some reason, he just couldn't fall asleep right away. And just as when he finally started dozing off, he heard some singing, and he didn't really care. But he thought, well, maybe it's because I'm so tired and walking all day, I must be hearing things. So he he made himself more comfortable and started sleeping, but the singing got louder. So finally, Napi sat up and was listening where the sound was coming from. And finally, being Nappy got really curious. So he got up and he had to be real quiet because whatever it is, he didn't want it to scare them. So he slowly started crawling real quiet, going to that place where that singing was. And finally, he got there, and it was an old elk skull. And the singing was coming from in there. So the eyes he looked in there, here was all these mice in there dancing and singing. They were so cute with their little feet and their little arms up, and they were jumping up and down. And the ones that not dancing, they were against the wall of the skull, and they were keeping up with the beat. So Napi rushed back and got his rope and went back. And when before he got there, he yelled out, pretending to cry, telling them if he can come in and join them. So one of the mice looked out and told everybody, "Oh, it's only our big brother Napi." And the elder mice said, I'll go out there and talk to him." And Napi was begging them, could I join you? I want to, dance too and sing. And the mice said, well, you're really too big. You can't come in. The best I can do is I can use my magic and make your head go through this. And you can keep up the music with your head. So Napi agreed. And that elder mouse said, but there's some conditions you have to follow. We dance for 4 nights, and these 4 nights you can't sleep. If you fall asleep, something bad's gonna happen to you. So you gotta remember that. And Napi said, "Oh yeah, I can do it. I'll do it." So they got Napi's head in there, and all night the mice danced, and Napi had his head going, keeping up with the music. He really enjoyed himself. He really enjoyed the mice singing and dancing. As soon as daybreak, all the mice just dispersed. So Napi fell asleep. She slept all day. Next thing evening, all the mice came back and they started singing again and dancing. And of course, Napi really enjoyed it. Kept on dancing and with his head moving around. And then daybreak came again and they all dispersed again. And Napi, for some reason, he couldn't really sleep. He was getting tired laying on his stomach and his head in this elk skull. But he managed to have a little sleep just when he was dozing off, it was evening and all the mice came back and they started dancing. And Napi was good. He kept up all night with the dance. And daybreak came, all the mice disappeared. Now it was the fourth night, and Napi couldn't sleep all day. He was so tired of laying on his tummy. No matter how hard he tried, he just couldn't sleep. Finally, finally got evening and all the mice came and they started dancing. This was their last night. And Napi was trying really hard to stay awake and his head kept on falling, but he'd wakes himself up. Finally got so tired he just fell asleep. Well, he was told not to sleep. While he was sleeping, all the mice ate his hair. They just, he was just bald. They just chewed up all his hair. When Napi woke up, there was no mice, and he didn't know he had no hair. So he got up and he couldn't see where he was going. And he thought, well, even if I could go out in the open, maybe I can see and I could, yell for help. And Napi was trying to walk, but didn't know what direction he was going, but kept on walking. All of a sudden he fell like a cliff. He fell right into the river. And Napi started floating and he thought, well, I'm going to swim to the shore. So he started swimming. And that skull was so heavy, kept on pulling him under the water. And he had to fight to get his head back out on top of the water. But Napi didn't know he ended up in the middle of the river. And he went down the river. And he was going in and out of the water and he was yelling, but because of the skull, his yelling was muffled. So, and down the river was a big camp, and the men had just returned with all the meat animals they killed, and the women were all at the river cleaning it and preparing it. And next thing one woman yelled, there's an elk coming down the river, and everybody jumped up, all those women, an elk coming down the river, and they were standing there. But Napi was still struggling in there. And as it got closer, they seen it wasn't an elk, it was a human. So one of the ladies said, go get that rope. Then somebody ran and got that rope. And just as he got really close to them, they threw that rope. And for some reason, Napi was able to grab it, so they pulled him to the shore. And they start trying to get that elk skull out of his head. They were trying, they couldn't pull it out. So finally they took a rock and they start banging it till it fell open. When it fell open, this man his head was naked. And these women have never seen a human like that with a naked head. And they screamed and they took off. And then Napi kind of acted cute. He was running around there acting crazy. And then he took off into the bush. He said, I gotta go hide. I can't let anybody see me with my head being naked. And that's the story about the mice and the men.